I would like to thank you for attending this webinar, and also I would like to thank our distinguished speakers for accepting our invitation in order to present their work and also to speak about a very important and very innovative effort. Alesha, Alexander, thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you for having us, and thank you for the introduction. I think I will start. Alexander, is it fine if I start?
Sure,
Yes.
sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I will tell a little bit about this project. So it's it's a big honor for us to hear your kind words. Actually, it is a little bit of a side project. We both do work in education and research. I'm more like Alexander does both. I don't know how he managed that. And I'm more in research. And this is one of the rare occasions when I'm also in the education. So with Alexander's guidance. And this project is not realized yet. It is important to note that it is not it does not exist as a game yet. It is a prototype and a number of scenarios that we are working on in our spare time outside of our working activities, unfortunately. And yes, Alexander works as the supervisor, so to say. Also, he provides the technical competence and the educational competence, and I work more as a creative part of the project, if you can say so, and also applying some of my experience that I acquired when I still was in Belarus. And actually I used to be a journalist, a Belarusian journalist in 2003, 2011, I think. It ended in 2011 for me after the previous hugely problematic situation after the elections in 2010, when we had the same thing in Belarus, but on a little smaller scale, which is kind of a hint that if the problem was managed 10 years ago, probably it wouldn't be that big today. However, I was a coward, and a very poor coward, so I stopped doing journalism in Belarus in 2011 and moved to game studies and started building my academic career and worked in marketing for a while. However, I used to work at a state propaganda office. This did not go well at all. And I also worked for a number of independent outlets that do not even exist today after 10 years. And of course, when we're speaking about press in Belarus and the current situation is, think of the first news outlet you open every day. For example, for some people it would be like BBC, for some people it would be like CNN. So it used to be Tudbay in Belarus, and this resource has been killed by the government, and all journalists are looking for new jobs now. That's the situation with press in Belarus. So I'm super lucky to get out of this just 10 years before it all went so bad. However, it's a sensitive topic, and I will get back to my presentation.
No, it is a very important topic, and it is really important that you mention it, because we have organized a webinar regarding the situation on media and press freedom in Belarus. And we extended as Digital Communication Network our strong support for the people that are fighting for values like democracy, freedom of speech, etc. And of course, your presentation is together with Alexander is totally linked with the situation that you described. Thank you, Alesha.
Thank you for your support. It's really it's nerve-wracking, and I'm trying to stay on track. I'm trying to stay on track with the presentation because it is more of my area of competence. I'm studying societal impact of blockchain, and this game is this future project of a game. It will use blockchain affordances that will allowed to model this problem in a very affordable technical environment and to replay different situations that can different situations that actually happen in real media houses and press clubs and even at state propaganda bureaus. However, let's get back to the educational part. Probably we could look at our next slide. This is the basic concept of our game, work in progress, Untrust Us. So it's an educational role-playing game, alternate reality game, which means that it intersects with the real world. And it has three major tasks, three educational tasks and topics. And the first one is accountability of citizen journalism and verification of news, because you already had presentations on that. I checked the YouTube channel and we won't be talking too much about this, but of course, citizen journalism and professional journalism coexisted probably for the time being, and they have different problems of accountability that should be studied and modeled. And actually our project with Alexander, it's a little bit like explaining this to each other. I'm explaining how the newsroom works and what kind of problems emerge even in the best of newsrooms, even in very favorable conditions. And Alexander explains to me how this can be modeled on blockchain. So, and how a newsroom works, it is very important because there are also possible conflicts of power between journalists, employed journalists, and freelancers who always have little less rights than professional journalists, and they also have little less accountability because editors will check after them anyway. And they also have less funds, which also affects their ability to deliver quality news on time, even in the digital times. So there are always possible conflicts of power that can be modeled in a role-playing game, so people would understand it a little better. It is not just the problem of journalists not checking the news. There might be questions of power, questions of money, questions of role-playing, and so on. And finally, how blockchain technologies work. Blockchain technologies are here to stay. Again, we have different positions. I'm a little bit more of a skeptic, and Alexander is a little bit more of an enthusiast. However, we both do our research and we know good and bad ways to implement blockchain, and particularly blockchain in media. So this technology is here to stay, and we have to learn to live with it, and we have to teach other people probably who don't have this experience how to live with it. And the problem of fake news, I think I won't be talking too much about it because it's also, I think you have covered it in other presentations. Probably we will move to the next slide now, and there is quite a lot of successful games about fake news, educational games mostly, and these are two best examples that are actually used for education. They have different origins. They have the bad news game is Dutch, I think, but they are international collective projects created by many developers and researchers. So this is the work of our predecessors. This is the work that we learn from and also implement sometimes and use in our own experiences. So the first game is the serious game Bad News. It is an online game, not our game, just to make it clear, just the game that we are learning from. And it teaches about the common tricks of online deception on Twitter, and players replay these toxic scenarios of spreading these fake news around Twitter. And they take the role of a villain. And it is a very interesting way to teach, because normally the educational content normally takes this moral virtuous approach. But this project allows the learner to take the role of a villain, of someone who spreads fake news, to understand how they actually work on people. And this is very important. And the research background, the research, like the scientific reason to use this concept outlined by the developers in the project is the idea of inoculating the public against the intentional misinformation. You can find this research when you look, like if you check this game online, it has this white paper attached somewhere, so you can get the list of research how this works. And inoculation means that the learner is exposed to this fake news, but the learner knows that the news are fake. So next time he or she or them experiences, like encounters fake news in the wild, they will know that this is fake news, and they will know this, I believe this because it, for example, because it appeals to my feeling and appeals to my basic emotions, or I believe in this because a friend of mine has shared it. So learners start to understand how this works from both sides, and they become less prone to believe fake news. And this has been tested quite a lot by my colleagues as well. And this game really teaches it really, really well. And the second game is Factitious. It's a little bit easier. It's not a role-playing game, so to say. It is just, it's a Tinder for fake news and true facts. So if the news is fake, you swipe it to the left, I guess, and if it's correct, you swipe it to the right, and then you see how many you scored. Yes, and you can actually make, as a teacher or as an educator, you can actually make this kind of game yourself with your own content. And my colleagues and Alexander, with a team of his colleagues and researchers, they actually made a prototype. It's available online. You can find it, CDG for Game Creator. It needs a little bit of explanation, but there is an instruction how to use it. So a teacher or media educator can build the same kind of news. You just take these cards, you see the web interface, you can swipe them, like you can program the actions, what to do with those cards, and you can make your own game, not necessarily about fake news, but about facts of history, for example, language learning, any case you want it. It's also the documentation is all online, and you can find it and use it. Okay, so previous research has already shown, like Alexander and colleagues, they tested the fake news game on their students once again with a very good results, but there are quite a lot of empirical studies that these kind of games really works really well, because games are generally more engaging than static educational materials, and they can be used for very engaging learning experience that can also be more valuable in terms of interactivity, in terms of replaying different scenarios. There are also games when students actually created their own scenarios. They engaged into a role-playing games. They, for example, in one study, other students were made, like they were the designers of a game about fake news. So they wrote fake news, like in the Mafia game, a little bit like that. And they would make games and play these games with other students, and also have an amazing experience and understand how this works. Okay, and we took all that previous work and started doing something ourselves. And now we will show you a little bit of our prototype built on the Ardor blockchain. And also we hope to connect it to Twitter, to a Twitter account. And basically it's two platforms, so it's Ardor and Twitter. This makes this game alternate reality game, because they're like, it's almost like real life. One of our main concerns is that people will start sharing these imaginary news created by students to cheat probably other students, and as if it is real news. We're still working on that, so probably we will need some controlled environment, for example, set the time, set the environment, and play these games somehow in a controlled environment, but this is something we are still discussing. So, and we hope to practice the following skills: evaluation of sources, because we can use it and we can build a little bit of link verification on blockchain, understanding how a newsroom works, this is the role-playing part, and understanding of blockchain technologies at large, because we will be using the real-life blockchain platform. Actually, we're using the test network of real-life blockchain platform, but Alexander will tell you a little bit more about it right now. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Maybe very short about me. My name is Alex Pfeiffer. From 2010 to 2018, I've been heading the Center for Applied Game Studies at Donau-Universität Krems. 2019, 2020, I had the opportunity to work as a postdoc at the MIT Education Card. I was heading a project funded by McCabe New York and the Austrian Academy of Sciences on blockchain in education. I'm now back in Austria, and I will start to work again full-time in Krems at the University from this summer. But that's my academic life, and my business life is I'm co-director of an emerging technologies lab in Malta and of a company called Picapipe in Austria. And this is also gamification and blockchain related, because we recently won the Austrian government state prize in blockchain technologies, which made us quite proud. So I hope that we know what we do in regards to gamification and blockchain, but of course there are always other people we can learn, as Alesha just described. So our project is basically that we have different roles. We have the Gotham Gazette, which is our website, which is basically sharing some of the news. We have different roles, as this the Gotham Gazette is run by our press club, which is the main blockchain account for our project. And then we have the roles of the players. They can be just readers, but of course they can be stringers, journalists, or editors. So they can have different roles as journalists within the project. And as I said before, the general public. And our two means of how we publish the news is, on the one hand, Twitter. So everyone of our journalists or the general public editors can post the news by themselves. They can post the news by themselves and link to our account, or our accounts are posting the news, and people have to verify and check if this is fake or not, and have to play Sherlock Holmes and try to find out the original sources. And what we like to achieve is that we show how blockchain technologies can, on the one hand, help to create a chain of trust and to secure the verification process of sources. But on the other hand, we also try to show the evil side, that if you publish fake news using blockchain technologies, you kind of have the possibility in your hand to make even fake news more legit. So this is something we need to take a lot of care in my humble opinion. It's in my education project. It's like if you scan a fraudulent credential from a wannabe university, then it's put on blockchain and it gets verified by the state. At the end of the day, you made a fraudulent document legit, and this person can call him herself master of art. So this is something we really have to take a lot of care about. We work with the blockchain called Ador. It's basically an upgrade of the NXT blockchain. NXT has been invented back in 2013, so it's one of the oldest blockchain networks actually, and it was the first full proof of stake network. And at the moment, if you follow the tweets of Elon Musk and of the declining price of Bitcoin at the moment, we are speaking a lot about energy consumption. And this is where Ador comes in place, because with the proof of stake consensus algorithms, you can run a full node on your mobile phone, on your computer while you're working. You can have full ownership of your data without actually using more energy than as you would use using your computer or smartphone anyway. So this is one of the reasons why I love this network, and the other reason is that I understand it and I can quite easily work with it. And I'm not that kind of tech person. I have a PhD in economics and business administration, and I'm approaching my second PhD in artificial intelligence right now, but also not that much from the tech side. So I would not call myself a hardcore developer, but I understand it a bit at least. So what we use is the API calls of the other network, so that we have it as an intermediate between our Gazzetta, our Twitter accounts, and of course the game back and front end. What is a goal that our players themselves do not need to be blockchain nerds. They don't need to have high blockchain skills. So basically our target group are regular people that try to understand only the part where they look into blockchain addresses and confirm if the transaction and the information in it is legit, but they do not need to purchase cryptocurrencies or anything like that. Not even our journalists. It's only testnet for now, but we use a principle called bundling. So all transaction fees would be paid by the main account. I think this is quite important to say. So we're not forcing people to purchase cryptocurrencies with our project. What is important for us is that we can set up, so what is important is that on the one hand, we can send messages on blockchain, encrypted and not encrypted. We can create our own tokens. This we need for the trust score. I will talk about this in a second. And that we can set up lightweight smart contracts, but above all approval models. What does this mean? We can be sure that our ecosystem is a closed one, so that you cannot send our trust tokens or messages in the wild from one account to another, or maybe even you can, the worst case scenario that people start to sell our tokens on the free market. So with approval models, we can kind of make sure that this is not happening and that we are a closed system. This is a big learning from my education project, because if you send a certificate to a learner, you do not want the learner to send this certificate to another person and then make someone else that she then passed the exam. This is how the network looked like. So basically you can try it all yourself on celloreader.com, for example. I can post the link later. This is a company which is related to the other network, and you help to improve the network, but the network other itself is a full decentralized network. We started with creating a blockchain seed, which is our main address. And with the blockchain seed and the main address, we also created a couple of sub-accounts, which we use for our game. So talk about the digital identifiers in a bit, but basically this is the website. It's even here on the slide, where you can easily play around yourself. You don't need to fear anything. It's testnet. All the tokens you create there and all the tokens you use have, of course, no value. But for playing around, the testnet of the other network is I think, a good tool to do so. So what's important for us is the key and identification management and blockchain. So what do we mean with that? We have blockchain technologies is one of the most secure forms to store data in a decentralized way. On the other hand, there is digital identity, and both have to go with each other. So what does the best database do? What's the impact of the best database if the information you store there is not verified who actually stored the information when, and so on? And on the other hand, what is the best identification management for if you store the information in an unsecure database that anyone else can hack and manipulate? So that is why we try to combine identity management with blockchain as means of storage for the data. In regards to identity management, we use digital identifiers, and they can be generated through various ways. We could use the government issued, from the government trust centers issued identities of the citizens, like the A-Trust in Austria. But maybe in the future for the game or for other application, you could use your bank account data. You can use any other form of identity, maybe even your verified Twitter account. And then, of course, you have certain levels of trust based on the original means of identity verification used. So if you just use your Facebook account, the level of trust is quite low. If you use your government issued digital identity, it should be at least quite high, but of course you can also find ways to fraud it at least for a couple of hours, I would say. So this is how the graphical interface looks like if you go on this testnet address. So it does not look like an hardcore programming website. It looks like a web tool created in the early 90s maybe, but it's powerful and you find where you click. So here you see all our accounts, the players from the prototype, our main account on the upper left, which we named Press Club. And what is important that all these addresses, so that the main Press Club address that you see in the left upper corner is also posted on our Gazzetta website and also posted in a transaction to ourselves, so that we have various ways that the readers or the contributors always know that this is not a fake website pretending to be us, that this is actually us, because they can just go on our website and look into the blockchain transactions. And maybe there is kind of a register which registers all the addresses used from journalists and magazines, so that it is very hard for fraudulent people to reverse engineer or to pretend to be actually a legit publisher. So here you see just the zoomed in the different account addresses of the different players, like a journalist, the Gotham Gazzetta again, and the Press Club. So what we do now is that the Press Club registers all the newspapers, which means the Press Club registers the Gotham Gazzetta. And then we have the journalists, which can either be just registered at the Press Club, or they can be registered with us, the magazine, and the Press Club if they work for us. But freelancers might only be registered as journalists in the Press Club. But then we can send a message to ourselves where we can ensure to our readers that this person is really working on our behalf. And here you see a JSON file. JSON file is basically the readable file of a transaction, which is used in the API calls, for example, between Twitter and the blockchain and the Gazzetta. So the first quests or goals that we set up during our prototype was that you either had to write an accurate report on a sports scheme of your choice. It should be as accurate as possible. And then the total score of believers will lead to the same amount of trust tokens. But you can also choose to write a fake report. And if you have more believers, with your fake report and with the real report, we would double the percentage of the score. So this would encourage our journalists to write fake reports, so we get more clicks and maybe more impact. And another goal was in this, there I have the test transaction here on the slides, was to report that there is a new blue house in Vienna. So I guess that there are hundreds of new blue houses in Vienna, but it's more about actually casting the simple sentence on blockchain to show if the transactions go through and if you can verify it. So you see here a journalist who basically found this new blue house, and he or she then wrote the message, the new house in Vienna is blue. And then the message is not encrypted because we want everyone to read this message. And you see the recipient account is named Gotham Gazzetta. So the journalist, which is registered with us, sends us the message on blockchain that there is this new blue house in Vienna. The example is a bit stupid. Maybe we should have found something different. But again, it's about if the tech works or not. So again, we see here the JSON file, the readable file we see, and this is very important here, the full hash. If you go into the Block Explorer, which is public available, you need to know the full hash, and with the full hash, you can verify that this is a legit transaction. So here you see the ADO portal, which is one of the many different block explorers of the ADO network. And this is from the internet website. We entered in the search field, on the right upper corner, the full hash. And then we see that one address is sending a message to another address, which is signed with the signature hash. And the message is here readable as we did not encrypt it. The new house in Vienna is blue. And then at the same time, we as Gazeta, we verify the message that we want to broadcast it. And we broadcast that the new house in Vienna is blue with then the link to the Block Explorer so that our readers can verify it. And then the Gotham Gazeta here, which is Alesha's account, wrote a nice story, engaging story that, wow, this new house in Vienna is blue. So we wanted to show like the flow of information from the journalist to the press club, then the journalist himself tweeting it, the Gotham Gazeta making a story out of it, but everything with the links to the Block Explorer, so you can have a look into the digital signatures, look into the transaction hashes, and in best case, be ready to verify that this is a legit and original transaction. And here the same, this is our website, the Gotham Gazeta, and here is then the long story on this blue house, but also with the links to the sources on blockchain. And then we have the trust score. So it's all about getting more trust. So this is the little gamification embedded, the in-game gamification, so to say. And what we like to achieve this then when we have our final game ready is that journalists with a higher trust score, and here we are a bit in this Black Mirror 5 stars episode dystopian story, that journalists with a higher trust score will, if our system has some AI and automatization embedded, the system itself will trust journalists with a higher trust score more than newbies. So the trust score is built through polls on Twitter, which can be also linked, of course, again, to blockchain tokens. There's a system we can use, it's called Smart Bots on the other network. It's easily to implement it, so we can also store the results of the polls again on blockchain. And based on the results, we created several million trust tokens, and journalists that have that gain the trust score due to the polls will then receive their amount of trust tokens based on the score, and this will represent the trust score. So I hope I gave you a bit of an impression on how the technical part and the flow of the game hopefully will look in the near to midterm future. As Alesha said, it's a part-time fun project, but with the goal to take it into real life and maybe write a funding proposal, or as we see from your invitation, great institutions like yours are picking up the topic and inviting us. So I think we are on the right track with this. And I give the microphone again back to Alesha, and it's on you now to play this little trust game with our audience.
Yes. Probably in one of our earlier discussion, we had this problem. Like sometimes you see fake. Like this is also the problem that we have as creators of our game. This is the real world problem, and this is also our problem. And the problem is that the real world news start to resemble fake news too much, and fake news start to resemble the real world news too much. So there's almost no way to distinguish them. And we are working on that. Like the onion news, like which are satirical news, are becoming viral as if they were true. And also we sometimes get this question from our presentation, but okay, how do you verify your news? Okay, as long as it is a game, this is an alternate reality game, but this is still a game, which means that there is at least some magic circle. There are the boundaries that distinguish the game from the reality, and within these boundaries we establish what is true, and we is this more or less democratic union of us, the game masters, and the editors who prove themselves to be honest journalists and who follow all the rules that we taught them, who check the sources of the news, who check the credibility of the people who bring these news to them, and so on and so on. This is what happens in the game. Now I want to do a little activity, and it will be it's kind of very emotional for me, but however, I will show you some news about Belarus. And your task is to decide, is it true or is it false? So we will show you the slide with 10 news. I will probably read them aloud because we are being recorded and it's easier to many people. And after I feel like when I read them, you make just small notes for yourself what you think is true and what you think is false. And then we will reveal the truth to you, which news were true and which news were false. By the way, I did not really this is me reading news from Belarus for for 3 weeks. Yes, this is basically 3 weeks of Belarusian news. And this is 3 weeks of the Belarusian news from the situation that has been going on for literally 1 year right now, since August 2012 or 20. However, okay, release the
Alesha,
Kraken.
may I just intervene for 1 second, following the discussion in the chat, why we did not use a regular database. If we use a regular database for this game, of course, we can do it like all the other computer games are doing, but then we can manipulate the data in the way we want to. We can override anything, we can change the timestamps. There's no way from our users to actually look into the data if it's real or not, and if the points are allocated the right way. That is why we would like to give all data that is sensible on the one hand, the news itself, and on the other hand, the points. We would like to give this into the hands of the crowd, into the hands of the people. And in this case, they can always check that there has been a transaction, and in regards to the points, they also will see the full amount of points allocated. And of course, some data might be sensible as message, and this is then encrypted, but they can always have a look into the transaction itself. I'd like to give you one very, very short example, which happened to myself in Malta. And I think this is a good explanation. I was driving with a taxi, and the driver was going much too fast. So I looked onto the speedometer in the car, and it was like 90 kilometers per hour. And the car driver had an accident. So, okay, thanks God, nothing happened to me or the driver, just to the car. But I wrote an email to the taxi company that this driver was going much too fast. And then they sent me an email with an Excel file. And in the Excel file, it was only showing that the driver was going 40 kilometers per hour. So everything is fine. So as this was, I believe that the data from the driver is stored in the database, because of course they like to monitor the drivers. But then this was just a Microsoft Excel file. Someone changed the 90 with a 40, sent this file to me and maybe to the court. It did not go to court, but in case this would go to the court, they would easily be able to override the data. But if they would use a system which is on blockchain, and the data would be submitted automatically on blockchain, then there would be the 90 kilometers an hour stored forever, and they would not have any possibility to fraud it. So if it's from the perspective of the taxi company, they want to fraud the data because they want to have the data in their hands. And this is always the perspective maybe most of the governments would have, because they want to have control of the data, and they don't want us citizens to look into it if it's legit or not.
And not only governments, Alexander.
Companies, governments, famous people, whatever. But we want to show that the different way that it is at least possible from a technical perspective to store the data in a way you cannot fraud it. And even if you want to fraud it, you have no possibility to do so. You can only write a new database entry on blockchain, but then you would still always see the old entry. So sorry for interrupting you. Please continue.
Alexander, before passing the floor, because you opened up, and Alesha, I'm sorry for the interruption again. Tyler actually asks another question, which I think since we opened it, it's good to respond to it, and then we can immediately play the game. Who votes on the authenticity of news? The players. What is the criteria for the authenticity in the game? What resources do voters consult to authenticate the news that they are voting about? Let us then play the game in order to have an outlook of how the game is working, and then immediately respond to Tyler's question as well as Sonia's remark. Thank you for being so engaging audience. Alesha, the floor is yours to play the game.
Okay, probably I will go a little back to the Tyler's question. Okay, as I said, this in the game, like in the game, we decide which is true, but we know which is true because we are game masters. This is one, and because we have this voting mechanism with the trusted, with the journalists who gained most trust, and by doing everything right, and they are in the press club, and this gives them the right to decide which news seem more which news are true in this fictional world. Okay, we're now still in the fictional world. This is more or less how it actually happens, because in a real news agency, you still you basically call the person, or you call other people in the location where something happens, and you verify it by talking to the people who were there. So it is not like we can continue there's always a chance that something did not really happen the way it was, but there is the reasonable doubt, and beyond the reasonable doubt, anything can happen, which we will see right now. We will have an exercise in reasonable doubt right now. But within the system, democratic system, with many participants who have the shared goal of delivering quality news, such systems are usually quite good at producing quality news. And this is the aspect of the game, and probably of the reality when it works the way it should work, that I personally would like to explore. And as of blockchain, back again to players, there are always, in the game, there are always the players who want to cheat, there are always the players who try to play against the game master, and there are always the players or younger players who would say, but how would I know that you are not making this up? And so a blockchain hash can be used just to show to those who don't believe you that this is a recorded fact. It is basically a substitute for just for a very well-protected document, at least in the game. Probably it will also be implemented in the reality, and it is already being implemented in countries like Malta and Switzerland. So, as a skeptic, my position is it is already happening. We need to learn to live with this. Okay. No, in the game, we're trying to determine, it depends on the game. Right now, I will be crossing the magic circle. I will offer you the news that are actually happening in the real world. This is where I show you the limitations. Actually, you are showing me the limitations, and I'm confirming your fears. Sometimes it is impossible to distinguish truth from from fantasy, simply because the reality is like that, unfortunately, especially now after we have been not doing enough to change it democratically for 10 or 20 or 26 years in the case of Belarus, for example. So now we have to deal with this reality that hasn't been cared about for 26 years. This is what you get when you don't do anything democratically for 26 years. And this is just, again, this is an exercise. So right now, you try to decide which news are true and which news are fake. Actually, they're on the screen. Okay, they're not on the screen, they're on my screen. Release the Kraken. So, Belarusian KGB hijacks the Irish airplane to kidnap the internet activist. How true is that? True or false? Another Ryanair carrier hijacked in Berlin by Gestapo. True or false? Putin demands release of the Russian girlfriend of the kidnapped Belarusian activist. True or false? IRA sides with Belarusian opposition against the pro-Russian regime of Lukashenko. Hamas condemns actions of Belarusian authorities and calls them unethical. EU bans all Belarusian airplanes from its airspace unless it's an emergency. Belarusian carrier Belavia opens a new route between Iran and Israel. Belarusian state TV broadcasts the confession of the internet activist accused of mutiny. Belarusian state TV, the detainee has enough food in his cell, some of it even edible. Finally, aliens abduct the Belarusian activist from the KGB prison cell. Okay, I think you already have your opinion. Half of these news are true and half of them are false. I think we can release the answers. So the first one is, of course, true. The second one is not true. It was not Gestapo. It was a false bomb threat. Then Putin does not give a damn about the actually existing Russian girlfriend of the kidnapped Belarusian activist who is also kidnapped. IRA did not even appear on the horizon of this real life case. The news about Hamas is actually true. This is like you can't even imagine that this is actually true. So EU actually has banned all Belarusian airplanes. This is true. And of course, there is no new route between Iran and Israel, but still Belarusians can fly to Israel. I think this is one of the few routes that are not closed. And I think, I'm not sure how they flew to Iran before. I think, yes, I think they did. So probably you can have a kind of a connection race, a route between those two countries now through Belarus. However, Belarusian state TV, both are true. This is what has been broadcast as the true news, and we mark it as true news because this is the way it was broadcast. So this is the fact that the Belarusian state TV actually said that, and this is as much as we can be sure in our situation. And no, unfortunately, the alien part is not true. Okay.
You don't know this for sure.
Unfortunately, but we don't know this for sure because we don't have the proof, because we would need the hard proof to be absolutely sure of that. So we would need like the confirmation from the Belarusian state TV, for example. Okay, anyone 10 out of 10? I guess not many people. Okay, is there anyone who got like 5 to 6 correct answers? I mean, that were the same as in our answers. Maybe someone has 5. Please write into the chat if you guessed if you guessed correctly. Yeah, I think we have a winner. Does anyone has 5 correct guesses? Yes, we have 5, and think about it, 5 out of 10. Yes, and this is the reality. And I know that this is a reality because I have these actual real life friends at the real life Belarusian press club that exists and operates.
I don't count on the ones that they have found 5 answers. So it's mostly the audience.
Okay, we will send you a postcard from, I don't know. We actually can send you something, Tyler. We can send something to Tyler. I will need to think about that. I haven't thought about that. Warm greetings from wherever we are. Okay, I have actually one more. This is a little more complicated, so I probably won't read everything because it's a lot of, it's a mouthful. Probably, you know, there is a YouTuber called Legal Eagle, and he does breakdowns of criminal, not criminal, just all of court cases and all this legal stuff that happens. And the next slide is 10 questions from the legal stuff happening in courts in Belarus, mostly court cases. And those are also you see, after this is the next lesson in journalism. After you have correctly identified the source, you probably have correctly identified most of the information, but fact checking doesn't end here. You need actually to check every part of the message, because most stupid mistakes unfortunately happen when you think it's correct and then you realize that you got one detail wrong, and this is no more true news. So these are court cases. You can read them for yourself and try to guess which ones are true and which ones are false. And this one could already be played in the game. But in our case, we would I wouldn't play the previous deck for ethical reasons, because it's like, I wonder how I am still able to talk about this. Probably it's just therapy for me to talk about this and laugh, because this is actually absolutely horrible. However, this one is a little more, is a little less horrible. And if it was in the game, we could introduce that in the game. We as game masters could decide and know which is true. But in our explanation, what is true, we would link the actual articles from the actual press and from the witnesses, or case, how do they call those people who actually were in court. Yes, like from the people who actually were in court. So we could, in our game world, if we were making a game about Belarus, we could use this piece of material. We could connect it to the real life sources that we trust, because we can actually check it through one or two people who actually were there. And this is also what journalists do, actually, as much as it is possible. By the way, if we come back to this Nehta case, Nehta was a Telegram chat that I can't say it organized the protest. It just was the Telegram channel where you would find all kinds of information. And there was a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. With all my respect to Roman Protasevich, Nehta was his channel. Nehta, his Telegram channel, was the place where you would come with a little bit of suspicion, and you would actually go and fact check everything that you would find there. However, they when people have the shared goal, they would do that. They will go and check and actually ask everyone and try to find the actual people who actually were there. So it was garbage in, but surprisingly, it was quite a lot of valuable information and true information coming out of that channel. And this is why Roman Protasevich is hopefully still alive now. Despite this, he is hopefully still alive, but in a very not good place. So, and I think you already made your decisions. Let's move to the next slide. And the next slide. So the first one is true. This was a big case. The second one, it actually happened, but in Russian. So you need to check where it happened. Next one was actually it happened. There was a snowman in Brest engaged in a picketing with a red flag, red scarf, and the slogan "Long Life Belarus." And of course, the snowman was not arrested, but as long as it was on the private property, the property owner was arrested and fined. So, a toy dwarf in Grodno, this is true. However, not all news are bad, and sometimes there are still some honest people in the court, in the Belarusian legal system, and some cases were actually closed without any prosecution. And so the toy dwarf in Grodno is fine. 6 retired women arrested for an unsanctioned Scandinavian walk in the woods are also fine. However, the next retired woman is not fine, but the news is still true. So the student was singing Marseillaise in English, but the rest is it's half true, but as long as we are talking about news, this is not it's a fake news. As long as it mentions French and it was actually in English, this news is fake. Because if you post it that way, you will 10 people will come at you in 5 minutes and explain to you that this is not true. This is how the Belarusian society works right now in social networks as well. I post something I reposted fake news once in this year. I reposted fake news once in this year, and I got a lot of people coming at me, and I never did that again. So this is an organized civil society in the terrible times. However, 60 protesters are still protesting at the Belarusian-Lithuanian border. And there are several tens of other protesters protesting at the Belarusian-Polish border for the same reason. And they are still there because they're on the right side of the border, so to say. And the problem is that the borders are closed, which makes it basically a North Korea situation, which is bad for everyone, like literally for everyone. It's not good to just put another iron curtain and lock everyone out and pretend that the problem does not exist. So the free firewood case is correct. This impoverished family had something to do with the protests, and yeah, and the goose named Harvey is actually a real life goose named Harvey, and he has a popular YouTube channel, and he participated in the protests. Yes, a goose participated in the protests. He is in a lot of banners because a goose says hug, which means that Lukashenko will go to Hague and get what he deserves. So, and they are fine, the goose is fine, and his owner is fine. They do these stupid videos just to like show the situation in a somewhat humorous light. Okay, this was a little like these, like I present this for you to understand that we know the difficulties that you are rightfully pointing at in your questions, and we are working with it. The problem is that we are only in the beginning of our journey, and we have a lot to do. And this is one of the things that we do just for ourselves. And yes, thank you for your comments. And yes, I see the question. How can you actually fact check this statement as a players? I think, Alexander, would you take this probably? You can fact check the, so we have this referral links that actually have this blockchain hash. This is one way to verify that this blockchain hash is actually connected to the truth, the certificate of truth in our platform. Or also we have this system of encrypted messages, so we can actually check which messages went from whom to whom and what their content was, and we can show all these proofs to the players who are not convinced. But I guess Alexander has a little better explanation. Or
yeah, so for the news that are produced with our registered users, with our registered journalists, they are registered with their addresses in our network, and the users can actually double check if this is a legit journalist working for us, if he's allowed to produce news on our behalf, if we pick the news from his original source. Of course, the journalist can also fraud us, so that he created news in such a perfect way and frauded all the pictures he showed us or whatever, that we believe the fake news. So this would be something to achieve for the journalists maybe working with us if they can trick us.
But he will lose his job in the next round of the game because we are playing it for several rounds.
If we find that he tricked us, of course, yes, then he would no longer be an official journalist from our Gotham Gazeta. But
yeah, I predict that the press club will vote him out, because when people have the shared goal, they will find out. Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, we also like to show that fake news can get a high trust score, because people are not double checking, and people try to fraud the origin of the source, just writing any blockchain transaction there, which if you double check, you would see it is not an official transaction from our closed system. But if you don't click a second and third time, if you just see, oh, there's something on blockchain there, it's legit, I believe it, then fake news would maybe get the high. So for me, from a scientific perspective, this is also a great way to show that blockchain is not the savior of everything, because it depends on the media literacy of the users to understand how to use it in a proper way. And as Alesha said, even Alesha reposted fake news, and I'm sure that I also reposted fake news, or at least found something and said it to my brother, look at this, and then, oh no, this is not true in that way. Often if it's like gossip, but if it's about politics, fake news can have, of course, a quite bad impact on everyone. And so playing this game in a real scenario, as we said, this was just a prototype, played in kind of a focus group with a couple of people. And it's a huge difference, the next step, playing it with more people, and the step after that, playing it with people we do not know. But I think it's a long way, maybe a year until we reach this quality of the game that we actually have enough courage to play it with the public.
No, we will, absolutely will. Okay, the final aim of the game is to publish as much true news as possible, and we can set different goals, but the end goal in the very basic version is to publish as much true news as possible and to not publish as much fake news as possible. This is the collective goal, and the goal of each player would be to get to the end of the game with as much credits, as much rewards as it is possible, because the journalists who post correct news are rewarded, and the journalists who post fake news are fined or banned from the system and start again as freelancers. So in the next round, they just come with some news that may or may not be approved. And also this is a very important thing, like the journalists who are in the press club, they get bigger rewards. And this is also the divide between the freelancers and the professional journalists in real life, because freelancers, they can only get some money sometimes for their work, and they don't have the resources to carry out like basic procedures, just basically to go there and check what happened. So for this reason, they're also in a more vulnerable position. And for this reason, some of the actually true and important local news do not always reach media outlets if like there are not enough professional journalists who do this job. This is also like how it works in real life, unfortunately. Yes, and so yeah, no, like this is what like a basic way of like is to play the game for example 1 day. If it's a role-playing games they can go for 1 day, for example, or for several days, but then it's a little hardcore. And in the end of the day, we have like everybody got the same amount of tokens and the same opportunities. And in the end of the day, some people were better at detecting true news, some people were more lucky, some people just were in the right place at the right time and probably knew something that helped them to identify more quality news. And some people could form also, as it happens in role-playing games, some people form some relationships in the game, they help each other, and this can also propel them to like reach the common goal. And in the end, we have this like neat website filled with the news, only the selected correct news from the ones that were published, for example, in our controlled Twitter environment. And in the extended version, we also implement the news that were written by the players themselves. But this is like a super hardcore version. It's like a super immersive role-playing game. In the basic version, we have true news and fake news like planted beforehand, and players distinguish which are which by using the heuristics of distinguishing fake news known by journalists, and by using our blockchain system, by checking the transaction, checking the hash, the link, and who actually brought this news in. That's the idea. Maybe the realization will not be as neat.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to thank Alesha and Alexander for presenting their very innovative approach and the game. I would like to thank them for having the time to spend and actually respond to every question that it has been raised. Before asking them if they have any final thing to say, whatever, I would like actually to open up the floor for additional questions. I think that the audience has been really engaging with many questions and with a lot of comments that will be that are really helpful. if you have any comments or additional questions, please share them with us now. Otherwise, before we close, I would like to ask both Alexandra and Alesha if they have a final, if they will have for their final say or additional comment. Alexandra?
I start. First of all, thank you again for the invitation. Thank you to the audience for the great questions and talking to us. For me, a huge issue with fake news in the sense of tricking people, which I'm encountering a lot at the moment and making screenshots for my talks, is if you are a fake company giving advertising money to Facebook, they publish your advert, for example, selling a PlayStation 5 in your web shop or in a game context. They create a fake Twitch website telling you that you get this new player in the Ultimate Team mode if you register on their Twitch website. So people think it's Twitch TV, but it's not. But it's a sponsored posting by Facebook. So people would think that, okay, it's a sponsored posting, it's an advert. So there might be someone on the Facebook side actually looking into the content they get when you try to get it advertised. And then they actually click on the link and you give your username and your password to this fake website, fake Twitch website, and then they can basically hijack your account, sell your players, sell the gold, etc. And I think this is a huge problem in regards to Facebook and advertising and cybercrime at the moment, which is something I would encourage you to take a look if you are on social media and look into adverts. And if you find something that is not legit in your eyes, click on the report button so that at least someone interacts and is trying to do something against it. So anyone who likes to stay with us on the topic of blockchain and fake news or whatever, I think you easily find us on our university websites, or I have this website alexpfeiffer.at where you can get in touch with me and I link you with Alesha. And the more people we are trying to work on things like that, the more impact we have. And again, thank you.
Yes, thank you. You've been an amazing audience, and this is exactly what we need, because we need to think about everything. As I've said, I'm less in education, I'm more in research. I will share my Twitter feed where I actually share the things that I'm mostly interested at, and this is game studies and visual culture studies, especially on like more marginal topics and the topics related to marginalized communities. So you can follow me there, but it's more like academic stuff. And yes, I would love to see free Belarus one day. I hope you too. And if you please, like in any other country, please just don't let the authoritarian regime go for 26 years. It does not end well. That's my message as a Belarusian immigrant, actually.
Thank you very much for both. Before closing the session, I would like to say that Digital Communication Network, it is an organization that works a lot on the issue, and this is why we actually had this webinar. Digital Communication Network endorses this kind of initiatives, and we are more than happy to have Alexander and Alesha in this webinar, but also we have devoted actually the whole month regarding gaming and disinformation as well. I would like to remind you that this webinar is part of our series Ideas in Action that we have started from March of 2020 with the support of World Learning and US and the State Department, the Citizens Exchange Office, whom we really thank for their support. Just to remind you that in the following weeks, additional webinars will follow. Please don't miss the chance to be part of it. You can find more in our web page, digicomnet.org. The next actually webinar will take place next week, and it will be as interesting as this one, and it will be on 16th of June regarding Global Game Jam. So don't miss the chance to be part of it, and don't miss the chance to register. Thank you very much, everyone, and the presenters and the audience as well. Thank you.